Hey, what's up, my people? John Middlekauff, new YouTube channel. What I need you to do, subscribe, like the video, leave a comment, share with your friends. Appreciate everyone that has. It's the podcast, 3 and Out. You can listen wherever you listen to podcasts. Apple, Spotify. We got you covered. Also, thevolume.com. We got merch right here. FlexFit hat. Go to thevolume.com. Get yourself a 3 and Out hat. What is going on? It is officially Mock Draft Wednesday. Well, for the top 10. I've texted all my buddies over the last week plus, personnel directors, college scouting directors. My overall take, people all over the map. This is not one of those drafts where it's like even personnel people could get 70% right. We're going to have some curveballs. We're going to have some trades. Buckle up. Get ready, because this thing's about to be wild, which is the best part about the NFL draft, is when you don't know what's coming. Obviously, the number one pick has probably been set in stone for a year plus. But other than that, tighten your seatbelts, baby. A couple other stories I wanted to hit on. Brandon Aiyuk. Rap Sheet said some stuff today that, listen, there is no guarantee, and it won't happen until draft night, that we will know his situation. Mike Silver, who has nailed 49er situations over the past year, I would say, been all over the Trey Lance situation. I think even before training camp started, that his job was in jeopardy, that he could be traded. Everyone freaked out, and he was right. He wrote today that Brandon Aiyuk trade on draft night is in play. I want to touch on why that is, because I think it's pretty clear why they're in this situation. And Andy Reid and Brett Veach. 3 Super Bowls, 5 years, extended. So we will touch on that. Before we get into the mock draft, I got to tell you about my close personal friends, my partners, and the official ticketing app of this podcast. They're known as Game Time. What I need you to do is go to your smartphone. Mine's charging over there in the window, and download a little app. It's the Game Time app. Go to a game. Go to a concert. Go to a comedy show and do it on us. Last night, turn on YouTube TV. Like during the NFL season, you get the 4 boxes. I got 2 hockey games, 2 NBA playoff games. I'm like, listen, not a huge hockey guy. Do want to watch the Lakers lose, but this is awesome. And playoff hockey, playoff basketball. I went to a playoff NBA game last year in Sacramento Warriors. It's fantastic. Anyone that saw the highlights of Jamal Murray hitting the game-winning shot, it's a pretty special atmosphere. Anyone living in the Northeast in New York area, I can't even imagine what MSG was like last night. If you live in Southern California and you want to go watch Lakers Nuggets, I got you. I got you, dog. Download that Game Time app. Promo code JOHN, JOHN, and save $20 off your first pair of tickets. I'm trying to help you out here. Prices everywhere we go are astronomically high. Anytime you can get a discount, you got to pounce. So right now, download the Game Time app, buy any pair of tickets to any event. Promo code John, save $20. Dun, dun, dun. Mock draft time. We will no longer have to guess here in about 24, 36 hours. We will know where all these players actually go. But until then, it's fun to guess. And I'm taking educated guesses. I've talked to a lot of people. Beside the Caleb Williams thing, I would even say Jayden feels pretty locked in. But I don't feel great about it. Like, I wouldn't bet my life savings that Jayden Daniels is going to be the Washington quarterback, even though it does feel like that. Adam Peters ain't some big talker. So until his name comes across, I won't feel great, even though I'm probably going to put him there. So let's just start. The Chicago Bears. The cool part about this draft is no one even has to guess. There's not even a question. This guy would have been the number 1 pick last year. The Bears, because of Ryan Poles, one of the great trades potentially in NFL history, if Caleb just becomes a top 10 quarterback. Everyone keeps talking about this guy becoming a superstar. If he can just become a top 10 quarterback, I truly believe it's one of the great trades of all time. Right? I mean, not even close. You traded essentially Bryce Young for DJ Moore and Caleb Williams and some other picks. Doesn't get any better than that. And the one thing I will say, I watched the pivot Ryan Clark and Fred Taylor and Shannon Crowder. They sat down with him. And I've watched a couple interviews with Caleb. He's really smart. I enjoy watching him talk. And I think, listen, the intangible stuff, how much he wants it, his drive to be great. He says all the right things. Life's not about what you say, it's about what you do. And he's going to have to prove it. Ton of pressure, but get to go to a place with a ton of offensive weaponry. I mean, you got 2 wide receivers who are legit. You got a solid tight end. You got some solid offensive linemen. Your team has another pick, which we'll get to later in this draft. Just a cool spot. A historic franchise that just gets jolted with some buzz. Caleb Williams, number 1 pick. I mean, I didn't even need to say anything. The number 2 pick. I'm giving Jayden Daniels to Washington, but I do think there's a chance that Drake Maye goes there. I just think that these draft picks, because just based on last season, can't be argued. You could argue Jayden had the best season of all the quarterbacks, him or Michael Penix. But it's about projecting. Now, if you factor in the offensive coordinator, that he's worked with a much more mobile quarterback before in Kyler Murray, but Cliff Kingsbury also coached Baker Mayfield and Patrick Mahomes. So I also think you got to be careful about picking a player for your offensive coordinator, because there's a chance in a couple of years, if Washington has success, Cliff Kingsbury gets a job in like the Big 12 or the SEC. As crazy as that sounds, like, get ready. It could happen. I'm giving him Jayden Daniels. Don't feel like definitely don't feel like Caleb, like that's 100% happening. I'm kind of being influenced by what everyone says. Now, granted, a lot of my friends in the NFL think that that's the right pick. I just put a bigger picture view. If you go back to 2022, Drake Maye was a guy that Nick Saban offered $5 million. And I saw someone in the YouTube comments on a video the other day was like, is that the dumbest decision anyone's ever made? Not to go to Alabama for $5 million instead of staying at North Carolina. But he made the decision, and ultimately he's going to be rich no matter what. And we'll get to Drake here in a minute. The New England Patriots are fascinating. I wanted to chalk them up for a trade back because I think there's been a lot of buzz. But my theory is not going to change on the owners are getting destroyed, constantly shit on. And a lot of it is self-inflicted. They produced the documentary that everyone hates. They produced the documentary that made Belichick look like an idiot. They did that. Kraft Productions. We know that Jonathan Kraft, not a big Belichick guy, couldn't wait to get his hands, basically run the organization that Bill did for almost 2.5 decades. And I think that you get a little cute and try to trade back a couple picks and then move back up for a quarterback. I don't even think it's worth it. Even though they have a million holes, their roster is easily, you could argue it's bottom 2 or 3 in the NFL. It's probably one of the worst in all of professional team sports. It's that bad. So just drafting a quarterback here, even if it was Peyton Manning, is not going to make you good for the next couple years. But the way these teams think, there are some talented quarterbacks in this spot. Let's just take it. Last time a team took the 3rd quarterback off the board, his name was Trey Lance. I do think the Patriots played a little safer here because Drake Maye viewed a little more as a project, a guy who's going to need some work. Well, if your team sucks, you're not in position to risk that. JJ McCarthy, my comp for him is Alex Smith, a little, in theory, higher floor. They've had a Michigan guy before. This guy's a proven winner. Obviously, the intangibles are off the charts. I'm going JJ McCarthy here with the New England Patriots. Pick 4. Monty Ossenfort has been saying forever, we are open for business. We want to make a trade. He doesn't have to worry about a quarterback. He's got Kyler Murray, who we'll see over these next couple of years if that's the right move or not. But obviously, Kyler Murray is going to be their quarterback for the foreseeable future. And they have a lot of needs. They also have an extra first-round pick because of the trade last year with the Houston Texans. I think that the Arizona Cardinals make a trade. And I think they trade with the New York Giants. The New York Giants just had a disastrous season. They've had a lot of those in the last 6-7 years. I mean, kind of embarrassing. They got excited for Tommy DeVito. If you remember, when the Buffalo Bills drafted Josh Allen, Brian Daboll was the offensive coordinator. You drafted who? This guy who can't complete, who couldn't hit water if he was sitting in a boat? Well, who was the assistant GM? Oh, the GM of the New York Giants as well, Joe Schoen. So Schoen and Daboll come from Buffalo, where they took a major project, who was a way bigger project and had never done anything close to what Drake Maye had done in 2022. And it changed all their lives. It changed Buffalo's franchise trajectory. It got those two guys, the head coach and the GM job of the New York freaking Giants. And let's face it, they have a million needs, 100%. Their quarterback situation sucks. They have Daniel Jones coming off an ACL who isn't that good, making a ton of money. And they're just kind of a lifeless franchise. You take Drake Maye and you say in the press conference, this guy reminds us a lot of Josh Allen. Now, whether that, comes to fruition and becomes true over time, who knows? But I'll tell you what it does. It gets people excited. And it's the right, what else are you going to do? Take a wide receiver, sit there at 6? You have who's going to throw him the ball? So this is my first trade. The Arizona Cardinals only have to move back a couple spots. They can still get one of the top players on their draft board. They accumulate an extra, early second day pick, and they're feeling good. The Chargers. Everybody and their mother. Wide receiver, wide receiver, wide receiver. I've been watching Jim Harbaugh's career since I went with my dad to watch the University of San Diego play UC Davis when I was home for Thanksgiving break. Jim Harbaugh went to Stanford and San Francisco and won a ton of games and didn't depend on wide receivers. Think about some of his teams in Michigan. Hell, his great teams in Michigan. Not a wide receiver dependent operation. He is dependent on the line of scrimmage, the running game, and the quarterback playing under control. He has never looked for Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen type play out of his quarterback. That's not the way he coaches. That's not the way he builds a team. And at the owners' meetings, he went on a long kind of diatribe about the importance of the offensive line. I think the Chargers go offensive lineman here. I'm going to give them Joe Alt, move him to right tackle. You got Slater at left tackle. And all of a sudden, in theory, you have one of the better tackle tandems in the NFL. I was listening to a podcast where Daniel Jeremiah gave them the dude from Alabama. I'm going to go with Alt, but ultimately, I think they go offensive lineman here. When everyone is going to be saying, why do you take Marvin Harrison? Because Jim Harbaugh hasn't had Marvin Harrisons. That's not the way he plays. Well, he's got Justin Herbert. He's going to try to make Justin Herbert a way more efficient quarterback. He's going to try to take pressure off him. I think the Chargers go O-line here at 5. The 82-game preseason is in the books, and it's finally time for the real season. Don't miss out on any of the NBA playoff action at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. From the play-in tournament through the finals, DraftKings Sportsbook has you covered with same-game parlays, live betting, odds boosts, and so much more. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code JOHN. New customers bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets instantly. That's code JOHN, John, only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. 6. This is an easy one. Cardinals move back a couple spots. They just take Marvin Harrison. It's a no-brainer. They turn in the card with 8 minutes left on the clock. Now, the league won't read it till there's 1 minute left on the clock because they want to play this out, help their partners out, everyone make money. If you notice, in the first round, they don't turn in picks for the most part with 7 minutes left on the clock. This is a television show. I think that decision would be made in a New York minute. Marvin Harrison, Arizona Cardinals, all of a sudden, you get Kyler Murray, a legitimate weapon to go with tight end who's already good, and then you continue to build it with your other picks, your second overall pick or your second pick later in the first round. All of a sudden you go, God, Arizona's got some young talent on the team. 7. This is another one. A lot like the Chargers. Everyone said the Chargers are going to take wide receiver. everyone said the Titans are going to take an offensive lineman. You know, the first guy I heard, what was I listening to? Oh, it was Diana Rossini. I was at the gym today and I threw on the Athletic podcast and she just went through her notes. I had heard the same thing. To keep an eye on the Tennessee Titans taking Malik Nabers at 7. I think everyone just assumes because they have a huge need. Well, what did Brian Callahan, when he got the job, do? He hired his father, who was under contract with the Browns, but because of the situation, they let him out of his contract, and he went to work with dad. A lot like what happened with Kubiak once upon a time with Kyle Shanahan letting him go work with Mike. Well, part of having that asset is being able to get guys in the second, third, fourth round and having your dad turn them into players. But I also think they believe that Malik Nabers' talent is probably a top 3 or 4 guy in this entire draft, non-quarterback. You put him with Calvin Ridley. They got DeAndre Hopkins, who's a little older, whose contract, I think, runs out after the season. They signed Tony Pollard. They need to find out immediately. Will Levis is getting 1 year, and it's this year. Prove you can play. Because if you can't, we're moving on. That's how fast we operate in the NFL. No one waits anymore. And there's going to be no question mark if I give you Malik Nabers, Calvin Ridley, DeAndre Hopkins, and Tony Pollard. Like, we got enough. And then it's on my pops we'll draft some more offensive linemen, coach those guys up. Brian Callahan, where does he come from? Cincinnati Bengals. What did the Cincinnati Bengals have? Early on, the offensive line wasn't great. What did they do? Invest in the wide receiver position. Remember, everyone said, including me, I wouldn't go Jamar Chase. I would take Penei Sewell. I'll promise you this. The Bengals do not regret that selection. Now, these players aren't exactly alike, but I think if Malik Nabers is on the board and they can't trade back, I think he's the pick at 7. Pick 8, the Atlanta Falcons. They've picked every skill guy under the sun in the last 3 or 4 years in the top 10. They obviously don't need a wide receiver, tight end, or running back. They view their offensive line as pretty good. Pass rush sucks. Many people in the league don't believe there's an edge rusher that is worthy of a top 10 pick. Dallas Turner, all the attributes, kind of a project, given where you'd have to pick him. Latu, medically retired because of a neck. And Jared Verse, more of a power rusher. And they play in a dome. Ideally, Dallas Turner makes more sense. But who's their coach? Raheem Morris. Where did Raheem Morris come from? The Rams. Who's the Rams' best defensive player? Aaron Donald. Byron Murphy, who I know multiple people that have spent a ton of time at Texas. He's one of their favorite players in the draft. Checks all the boxes on the field and checks all the boxes off the field. What's the knock on him? A little smaller. Little under 6'2". Saw one of Lance Zierlein's comp to him was Ed Oliver, who went to Houston, big recruit. Well, what pick did Ed Oliver go to the Buffalo Bills? Oh, he was the 9th pick. I think the Atlanta Falcons just take the best defensive lineman on the board. And I think a lot of people, a lot of teams in this draft will have Murphy as their top defensive lineman. And in 2024, obviously, edge rushers are great. What the hell's the difference? Like, Aaron Donald was the best defensive player in the league for a long, long time. J.J. Watt, in his prime, was like this hybrid interior-exterior rusher. Fletcher Cox is going to go to the Hall of Fame, lined up over guards. So if I think this guy is an impact player, I'm not saying he's going to be Aaron Donald, but I just have a track record of working with a player that has similar measurables. Well, what separated Aaron Donald? Obviously, he's really talented. His just freakish work ethic, desire, and drive and love of football. And he just played his ass off. Well, I think a lot of people think Murphy falls under that category. So I'm going Atlanta Falcons, take Byron Murphy here with the 8th pick. We have a trade at 9. The Bears easily could take Rome Odunze right here. Easily. And no one would fault them if they did that. But I also think if you're at 9 and some of these teams now, we got Caleb off the board, Jayden off the board, JJ off the board, Drake Maye off the board. The Raiders are pretty desperate. And for a long, long time, if you go to YouTube and you just type in Al Davis Raiders and just some of the videos that have been made over them in the history of the franchise from NFL Films, he hung his hat on press coverage, athletic DBs, and speed wide receivers and throwing bombs. He loved going deep. That was the Raider way. Just win, baby. And they've obviously gone far away from that and been a pretty average to below franchise for a long, long time. Well, Michael Penix is a fascinating guy because if Penix didn't have the injury history, even if he was his age, been in college a little longer, some of these other guys, I think we would all agree, universally, he's a top 10 pick. Then he goes to the pro day and works out. If Al Davis was alive, Michael Penix would be a Raider. Now, Antonio Pierce keeps saying, I'm a Raider. I know the Raider way. Well, where does Telesco come from? The Chargers. And what did they just get that kind of changed their franchise? Justin Herbert. What does he do pretty well? Big arm. Throws the ball down the field. The Raiders are pretty desperate. They have a team with some talented elite impact guys. Crosby, elite. Devontae, elite. Colton Miller, damn good. Like, they got some pieces there. They're also in a division now with the best team in football, and Jim Harbaugh just showed up for the Chargers. Like, you're not going to be competing to make the playoffs with Gardner Minshew. I don't care what he just did in Indianapolis. He's a really good backup, and I feel pretty good about it. I think the Raiders trade up to pick 9 with the Chicago Bears. They just move back a couple spots, still can get a sweet player. Add, I don't know, a third-round pick or something. And Michael Penix is drafted, and he becomes a Raider. 10. I didn't even need to think about this. This one was easy. This one's been out there for a long time. I've talked to people in the league that say, yeah, it's going to happen. Jets are desperate. They have to win right now. They do not have a choice. If you just based on what this guy did over the course of career, I don't think you could argue that he's been one of the best players in college football for 3 straight years. And he didn't play at some random school. He literally played at a school that won back-to-back national championships and was right there for the playoffs till Nick Saban upset him in the SEC championship game. He played on a team with what felt like 50 NFL players. I think over the course of 2 years, like 15 of their defensive players were drafted. He went up against these guys every day in practice, and he started immediately. Kid from Napa, goes to Georgia, dominates immediately. I don't see how Brock Bowers isn't good. He's not your 1988 tight end. He is really more of a slot wide receiver hybrid. Well, who's going to go down as one of the greatest tight ends of all time? Travis Kelce plays that role. Put him with Aaron Rodgers, Garrett Wilson, Breece Hall. Put all of our chips in the middle of the table. Like, you've already, listen, I think it'd be easy to go tackle here. Here's the problem, though, and I could easily talk myself out of it if I'm Joe Douglas. What if our 2 tackles stay healthy, which is a big if? Then that guy doesn't even help us out. So I think the Jets go Brock Bowers. So to recap, Caleb, 1. Jayden, 2. JJ McCarthy, was going to shock some people, 3. Drake Maye, because of a trade-up, New York Giants get their quarterback. Joe Alt, Chargers. Marvin Harrison, Cardinals. Malik Nabers, Titans. Byron Murphy, defensive tackle from the University of Texas, goes to the Atlanta Falcons. Penix, Raiders at 9. And Brock Bowers rounds out the top 10, which I saw you get some tasty odds on DraftKings, plus odds for him to be a top 10 pick. That's my mock draft. eBay Motors is here for the ride. You know, the first car I ever got, I was 16 years old, and my grandpa gave me a ride. And like any young lad who got a car that, let's face it, would not have been my first choice, I had to touch it up a little bit. And we tinted out the windows. We added a big subwoofer to the back. And you could hear me from miles away coming home. My parents sure loved me for that one. So did my neighbors. But I think the key to any young person getting a car is to personalize a little bit, because you're probably not going to get your dream car. And as you get older, you kind of become a car person or you don't. But you definitely have preferences, right? Some of us like bigger cars. I know I do. I've only had big cars, SUVs. And there are certain non-negotiables. I like 3 rows of seats. Now, ideally, I don't have kids right now, so I take out that 3rd row seat, and I like a big, I like a lot of trunk room. Some people, don't like SUVs, like smaller cars. I've never been that big since my high school car of tinting the windows. I don't care if you see me or not, but I know some people, like, the first thing they do is tint the windows. It's crazy. The older you get, I had to have the subwoofers. The subwoofer, I couldn't listen to music for 5 minutes with the subwoofer like I did when I was younger. But there is something very, very special about that first car. I don't care how many cars you get since, how much money you make to get sweeter cars. You never quite forget that first ride and some of the memorable moments that you had in it in your high school years. So with over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you can make sure your ride stays running smoothly. Brake kits, LED headlights, roof rack bumpers, whatever your baby needs, eBay Motors has it. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, it's guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time, or your money back. Plus, at these prices, you're burning rubber, not cash. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. Couple other quick things. Rap Sheet said today from Detroit that it is still up in the air if the 49ers were to trade Brandon Aiyuk on draft day. Michael Silver wrote something in the San Francisco Chronicle basically reiterating that same thing. Trading Aiyuk on Thursday is in play. Could be Friday, depending on the picks you get for him. To me, this gets back to the Trey Lance trade. For 3 years, they got nothing. They drafted Trey Lance in 2021, started 4 games, wasn't any good. They didn't have a first-round pick in 22 or 23. Now, they have been really good over that period of time. But in that Chiefs game, you felt their lack of depth because they have missed on some 3rd and 4th rounders and even a 2nd rounder in recent memory. The pressure on those guys were essentially their first-round picks, and Drake Jackson's nowhere to be found. Danny Gray, done nothing. Ty Davis-Price, the running back from LSU, practice squatter. Because of their lack of draft capital has hurt their depth. But the problem with their team is they already had some really high-end players. They had to pay a lot of money. Debo, ton of money. They acquired McCaffrey, ton of money. Trent Williams, ton of money. Hargrave, ton of money. Bosa, historic money. Fred Warner, ton of money. Charvarius Ward, ton of money. They're paying guys a lot of cash. So you can tell me, oh, Brock Purdy makes something or makes nothing. Totally agree. But they have 6, 7 other guys that are being paid premiums. And because of their lack of draft capital over the last couple of years and whiffing on some 2nd and 3rd round picks, which were their first-round picks, like they're kind of in a weird spot. Do they love Brandon Aiyuk? 100%. How could you not? Guy's a fucking stud. Brandon Aiyuk could play for all of our teams every day of the week and twice on Sunday. You want that guy in the trenches. But this is a business, and you have to build your team. And I think if they could choose, if it was just scratch, and you could just get rid of one and keep one for the next 5 years, they would keep Aiyuk over Debo. But because of the money they paid Debo, they're kind of stuck with him. So now you look at it and you go, well, how do we gain some draft capital? Trent Williams, 35 years old. Like, how are we ever going to get another offensive tackle? Well, I think we got to think. Now, you're not going to give him away. Ideally, you'd like a pick in the late teens, early 20s. Are you going to get that? I don't know. Because if you think of a recent comp of a guy that was traded on draft night was A.J. Brown. Pick 17. Well, A.J. Brown's a better player than Debo Samuel. Or, than Brandon Aiyuk. Last year, I think they did entertain it in that, like, mid-20 stretch. I think they were kind of hoping the Ravens would be interested in doing a deal. But the Ravens got Zay Flowers, who's excellent and now makes way less. Because part of the problem is, and Rap Sheet said this, is the Niners are prepared to pay him. I'm sure they're cool with paying him like $23 million. But Aiyuk and his representation know right now there are other teams prepared to pay him more. This is like the L'Jarius Sneed situation. It's like the player has a little leverage once he knows these other teams are willing to pay me more. Then it's on you to figure out the compensation. So would you take, and here's the thing, if you do make the trade, the pressure on you to nail the picks is everything. Because I know Brandon Aiyuk is good. The Chiefs traded Tyreek Hill, who's obviously better than Aiyuk and one of the greatest receivers of all time. But what did they immediately do? They got picked, one in the early 20s and one in their own pick. They got 2 impact starters. One guy in Trent McDuffie that looks like one of the best DBs in the league. And Karlaftis is just a really good player, starter on a Super Bowl team. 1-2. So I think the Niners, if they knew they'd get that, they would do it. But that's where the risk is. Like, they've done it before. They're like, we don't really want to pay Buckner 20 plus a year 5 years ago. So we'll trade him for the 13th overall pick. Was the right move. At the time, celebrated. I'd trade DeForest Buckner all day long and every day for the 13th overall pick. The problem is they got cute. They traded with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Backup pick. The Buccaneers took Tristan Wirfs, who's become a Pro Bowl, All-Pro level talent and stalwart for their franchise. And they took Javon Kinlaw, who they thought would be Buckner's replacement. Well, in 2024, Kinlaw's no longer on the team. And for the most part, was a disaster for them. Not all his fault. His knee doesn't work. And he was constantly battling injuries. So I think you get to these points where your previous history impacts you. It just does. It's why, is there a chance that Adam Peters really likes Drake Maye? Hell yeah. But he goes, I just saw what a project, if it doesn't go well, and we had Kyle freaking Shanahan, and it was a disaster. I just saw Jayden Daniels dominate. I know if I just plan on the trajectory, I feel that's safer. So the safe thing here, keep Aiyuk, but you can't always do that. For a long period of time, Belichick didn't do the safe thing, and he benefited from it, and he was able to reset his salary cap. Andy Reid, since trading Tyreek Hill, has won 2 freaking Super Bowls. That was definitely not the safe thing. Look at the Packers. In a 2-year span, they traded Devontae Adams and Aaron Rodgers. And now it looks like, I would imagine most people are going to pick them to have 10 plus wins this year. So if you want to play it safe in life, you're probably, if you're going to drive in the slow lane, you're probably going to avoid more wrecks than those driving in the fast lane. But those guys are going to consistently lap you if they don't get in wrecks. So I see where they're coming from. I just know this. If you make the trade for whatever, pick 22, a couple second round picks, whatever it turns out to be, you better fucking be right on the guys you pick. And they better have an immediate impact. Because you're trying to win the Super Bowl now. And here's the other thing. Your young quarterback, who has been a revelation, history of the NFL, we've never seen anything quite like it. The last pick in the draft being this good. Him and Brandon Aiyuk have pretty good chemistry. Like, kind of works, He's his number 1 target. So you remove that, you also risk throwing off Brock Purdy's game, which would have, a snowball effect of negativity. It's one thing just to lose Aiyuk and try to replace him. It's another thing then if it bleeds into your quarterback, if he doesn't have a repertoire with whoever you bring in. So that's what I like about that's what I like about life. Take some big swings. Some work, and when you get extra credit when they do. And when they don't, people talk a lot of shit. It's like, you didn't have to do that. Last but not least, the power of getting your coach right changes your franchise. And I think hiring a coach is a lot like draft picks. No one actually knows. No one does. No one had any clue that when Kyle Shanahan and Sean McVay signed with the Rams and the Niners in 2017, in 2024, we talk about those two the way we do. even though both of them, especially Kyle, had been an offensive coordinator for a long time. But we have seen countless up and coming offensive coordinators just being overwhelmed and failing, right? It happens all the time. But Mike Tomlin was in his early 30s. Most people hadn't even heard of the guy. No one saw that coming. Even John Harbaugh was a special teams coach whose brother had played in the NFL for a long time. The Harbaugh name wasn't quite as sexy in coaching circles in 2006 and 7 as it is now. But sometimes guys are available. It's like, yeah, it's kind of a no-brainer. Like Jim Harbaugh. When Michigan hired him, of course he was successful. The Chargers, of course he's going to be successful. Pete Carroll, when Seattle hired him, it's like, well, he's won before in the NFL. He just had one of the great programs in the history of college football. Yeah, it's probably going to work. And it did. Andy Reid, it had ended so ugly in Philadelphia. Trust me, I know I was there. With a 4-win season, I think everything he had accomplished, people in a weird way like forgot about or thought that was something of the past, because he had proven for over a decade, I'm going to win. Maybe not the Super Bowl, but we're going to be in the playoffs the majority of times and win playoff games. We are going to be a high-end franchise. And looking back when he signed with the Chiefs, there has to be, if we went back and broke it down, 25 plus teams that regret not firing their coach immediately and hiring. But I think Andy Reid was viewed as like, yes, best days are behind him. Not that good. Losing touch. What's he like? Without Donovan McNabb, what's he really done? I took Michael Vick out of Leavenworth and almost won the MVP. We had a bunch of injuries in 2012, and it was ugly. And the dream team, because it was so hyped up, clearly was somewhat of a black mark, I guess, at the time on his resume. Well, he took Alex Smith, and they immediately made the playoffs like 5 of 6 years in a division with Peyton freaking Manning and Phillip Rivers in the prime of his career. And then, like any good coach, if you get the right quarterback, Belichick, Brady, Walsh, Montana, the equivalent of Parcells with Lawrence Taylor. I know he's not a quarterback, but his impact essentially was. It's not going to be a fair fight. And because of Brett Veach, who has been Andy's right-hand man for like 20 plus years, who after the John Dorsey situation with the owner fell apart and they named Veach, it hasn't really been a fair fight. They might have rough stretches during the season, but we have seen now for over half a decade in the playoffs, they are the clear cream of the crop. And here's the other thing. Over that period of time, the AFC has been better than the NFC because I got to play Josh Allen every year. Think how many times the Chiefs have played Josh Allen in the playoffs. Back-to-back years. We played Joe freaking Burrow. He even got us one time. Last year, we played Lamar Jackson on the road. It's reported that Andy Reid will now be the highest paid coach in the league. Sean Payton makes $18 million, and Andy's going to make more than that. Whatever Andy Reid is making, it's a deal for Clark Hunt. I don't think Andy should make more than maybe Patrick Mahomes. You could argue the talent more important than the coach. But is there another guy, including Chris Jones, that he should make less than? At worst, he should make the same. If I told you right now that he makes $30 plus million, no one would bat an eye. If he was a free agent tomorrow, would a team give him 4 years, $120 million, $30 million a year? Bet your ass they would. So Clark Hunt just got to deal with Andy Reid. He did. Because Andy and now Veach and Mahomes have turned the Chiefs into like, this kind of historic franchise, one of the original franchises. Hank Stram, big part of all the old films, the NFL films and Steve Sable, to one of the biggest brands in the NFL, to the marquee team in the National Football League with the marquee player. And the reason that player is there is because of Veach and Andy. So props to those guys for getting extensions. One thing I always say is I'll never be around another human that I've ever seen work longer. His work stamina is unparalleled. Maybe there are people that have the same, but I think it's impossible to have more. I think it'd be impossible to have more. And I hear stories whenever I go to the combine. I obviously know the majority of people in the coaching staff and just around him. They say his love for football, and I'm not talking during the season. I'm talking like a May. I'm talking like June. Texting people, hey, swing by the office. I got an idea. And I get back all the time, or I mean, I say this all the time, is find what you love to do and attempt to do that for your profession, because it's so much easier to just be passionate about working. Because I don't care what you do, working becomes a job. Whether you're a football coach, whether you're a car salesman, whether you're digging ditches. Obviously, some are more difficult physically on your body, but Andy Reid's love of football, his passion for football, and obviously he's a very talented coach. And I think what makes him unique, a little like Pete Carroll, and why he's perfect for this day and age of players, but he's had success with old school players as well, is he's a California kid. So his disposition is not angry, screaming all the time. He's not a swearer and a cusser. And he can be hard, and he runs a tight ship. Like if you're not sitting out many practices during the season, it's not a country club. Kelsey Travis on his podcast has reiterated that over the years. This is not a place for everybody, even though he's not screaming at you all the time like maybe Belichick or on you like that. But what he's done with the Kansas City Chiefs, absolutely remarkable, and fun to watch. He's not going anywhere, him and Veach. So if I'm in the AFC, buckle up, because the Chiefs are going to be the clear favorite until they're not.